Hi everyone, my name is Jonathan Curtis. Welcome to this video. Today we're looking at chapter 2 from Linear Freedom, carrying on from the previous lesson. Just a quick correction before we start. In the first video, I said we looked at triplets in chapter 3. That's not quite right. We look at triplets in chapter 4. I'd forgotten there is a chapter 3, combining chapters 1 and 2. Anyway, just a quick correction on that. Triplets are chapter 4. So we're carrying on from the last lesson. I would suggest, if you haven't seen it, you look at the first lesson first, because this carries on from there and it is sequential. It's not completely necessary, but I think you will have a better idea of what's going on with the overall concept if you are familiar with the material from the first lesson and the first chapter. So link in the description to video 1 if you haven't seen that already. In lesson 1, we looked at single kick drum substitutions in a 4-note phrase. We're dealing with 16th notes. We're phrasing them as single strokes, right, left, and we are substituting one bass drum at a time. Now, one of the rules we had was that we were not having 2 or more consecutive bass drum strokes. There was only ever a single bass drum at a time. So, for example, right kick, right, left, just one bass drum. So today we are looking at the exact opposite of that. We are looking at 2 consecutive kick drum phrases. The chapter starts on page 30 and the basic phrases are shown on page 32 for those of you with the book. There are 4 basic phrases in this chapter, and these are derived from taking the single stroke roll, right, left, and finding all of the ways we can substitute 2 consecutive bass drum strokes into that while retaining the single stroke sticking. So as I said, there are 4 of them. Basically, think of placing 2 bass drum strokes at the end, moving them to the middle, moving them to the beginning, then having 1 on either end. So our 4 basic phrases with 2 consecutive bass drums are as follows. Prompts on screen for those of you without the book. The first one will be very common, will be very familiar to most of you. Right, left, kick, kick. That's probably one of the most common licks in existence. Nevertheless, there is a place for it, and it is the first of our basic phrases today. Basic phrase number 2, the second one I played, has the 2 bass drum strokes in the middle, and the sticking is right, kick, kick, left. This and number 4, which has the 2 bass drum strokes on either end, kick, left, right, kick, may have slightly unintuitive stickings to you if you have learned this in another way. What I mean is, phrase 4 especially, with the bass drum strokes on either end, most people might learn this kick, right, left, kick. It sounds the same, but it feels like you're leading with your right hand. In actual fact, if you're counting this as 16th notes, that places your right hand on the E, 1, E, and And this has wider implications in your sticking when we start combining these later on. So for the purposes of this concept, remember, as I've said in lesson 1, this book provides a concept. It is wise, I would suggest, to keep the sticking as written for now, because we're coming on to one of the crucial rules in this chapter. Thinking back to lesson 1, our rule was, with the single kick drum stroke, the same hand that plays before the bass drum plays again after the bass drum. So if you are playing a single stroke roll, right, left, right, left, right, left, right, you play a bass drum after that right hand, and you come back in with that right hand. You retain your single stroke sticking. In chapter 2, with the case of 2 consecutive bass drum strokes, again, the reverse applies. If you come in with a right hand and then play 2 bass drums, you would resume on the left hand. This is because, again, retaining that single stroke sticking, right hand, left hand, right hand, left hand. Those 2 bass drum strokes have taken the following left, then the following right, bringing us back round to our left again. Right, left, right, left. Same again with phrase 4. That very first bass drum is the right hand, meaning we then have a left, a right, and then the second bass drum is the left again. Right, left, right, left. It may be unintuitive at first, but as I've said, with regards to the larger picture, it is worth doing. So, just like in chapter 1 with the first material, with the first set of material, your first job is to become comfortable with this material mechanically. Take the 4 phrases, take them individually, and try and orchestrate them. So a basic orchestration is just taking them around the drums. I'll take phrase number 2 because it's a bit different. Right, kick, kick, left. That one's quite good fun once you've got it up to speed. When you've worked your bass drum speed up, you can really start throwing them out there. It's a simple 4-note phrase. Simple doesn't mean easy, but take your time with it and build up that speed, because even a simple phrase like that can be very powerful. So take each of those 4 phrases, orchestrate them around the drums. So notice there, I orchestrated it in 2 different ways. I had both hands on the same drum going round the drums, and I had the hand split across 2 different drums at the end there. That one can be a really nice way to spread your hands and spread that phrase across the entire kit, hands on 2 separate drums every time. So don't underestimate how powerful just one of these phrases on its own can be. So let's assume you have taken one of your phrases, one of these basic phrases. Let's stick with this one for now, number 2. And you are trying to really sort of integrate it into your playing. You can start to use it as a fill. Start as simple 16th notes. Notice, because we've retained that single stroke sticking, we finish on a left hand on the of 4, E and meaning it's very simple to go back in on our right hand. This was one of the intentions of the book, one of the aims of the concept, to make it very easy to combine and stay on the beat. So we finish on the left hand, we can go straight back into the beat on the right hand. You can even try playing with accents, orchestrating between the hi-hat and the snare drum to create a linear groove, still just using one of these phrases, phrase 2. So I'm going to start with my right hand on the hi-hat, left hand on the snare drum. I'm going to play it in this position, and that left hand stroke on the snare drum is going to be a ghost note. The second time round, I'm going to move that right hand to the snare and accent it. That left hand is still a ghost note. So that phrase there takes up 2 beats of the bar. We can do a basic groove for the first 2 beats and then use that in beats 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and da 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 da. 1 and 2 and da 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 da. And straight away, you're getting this really nice linear element into even the simplest of grooves. So once that starts to get comfortable, we can jump up into phrasing these as 30-second notes. 30-second notes are really interesting to play, really fun to play, really cool, but they rely on two things. They rely on you having the mechanical ability to play up to speed, and they also rely on you having the mental ability to hear them at the correct rhythm. It's no good just playing everything as fast as you can and kind of shutting your eyes and hoping you're in time, because you won't be. So you need to learn to count 30-second notes just as much as you need to learn to play whatever you're playing fast enough. When we count this, you're going to get 2 notes for every 16th note count. 1, E, and 2, E, and So when you are playing these and you are counting them out loud, still count in 16th notes, but this time you're playing twice per count. So let's take that second phrase, right, kick, kick, left. We're going to phrase it with the right hand on the high tom, the left hand on the snare drum, and a right hand accent just afterwards. Right, kick, kick, left. There's our phrase, followed by a right hand accent. Now let's think about where that accent would usually fall in a basic rock groove. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Okay, we want that accent to fall on beat 4 of the bar as if it were a normal downbeat. So we're going to start our 30-second note phrase just before that on the and of beat 3, because as I've said, 4 16th notes, when condensed down into 30-second notes, will only take up 2 16th notes. So we're going to play our 30-second note phrase on the and the of beat 3, meaning that accent is going to come in on beat 4. I'll put a prompt on the screen because rhythmically that can be a bit awkward if you can't visualize it. So we're going to play 1 and 2 and 3. We're going to come in on the and with our 30-second note phrase, and then we're going to accent on the snare on beat 4. Let's add another hi-hat on the and of 4 after that snare drum, and we can continue the groove. Once you've got that 30-second note rhythm internalized, you can have a lot of fun with it there. You can start to hear how it can add such a nice kind of twist to that groove you're playing. So to recap so far, we've taken our 4 basic phrases, we've learnt them mechanically, individually, we've orchestrated them around the drums, and then with all 4 of those phrases, we have explored 30-second note applications, because there's a lot more to it than simply just playing it as a lick in one place. I mean, it sounds cool the first time you do it. But that's going to get a little bit tiresome after a while, especially when you're just using one 4-note phrase on repeat, because it's predictable. So we'll talk a bit more about the gospel chop side of things in a later lesson. But one thing I will say is the best, or in my opinion, the coolest sounding phrases are more interesting note lengths and beat lengths. So for example, take a 3-beat phrase and play that as 30-second notes. That's far more interesting than a 2 or a 4-beat phrase. Anyway, we've explored some 30-second note combinations and applications within a groove. Now we want to start looking at combinations of the basic phrases themselves. So again, for those of you with the book, turn to page 35 and you will see 6 2-beat combinations and 3 4-beat combinations. Now, I'm not going to go into such great detail because there are some of you without the book that will simply not care at this stage. But the basic idea is there are certain combinations which yield results that we don't want. So for example, phrase number 1 is right, left, kick, kick. Phrase number 3 is kick, kick, right, left. Now you can see straight away if we combine those two, we're going to have right, left, kick, 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 right, left. And while it is perfectly possible and perfectly playable, it breaks our rule of the chapter. In this chapter, we are specifically dealing with 2 consecutive kick drum strokes. And let's face it, playing 4 bass drum strokes in a row as 30-second notes is not a particularly appealing concept, and it's probably not the most pragmatic way to play the drums either. If you've got a double kick pedal, it's certainly something you can try, but for working with linear playing on a single pedal, which is what this book deals with, I decided to basically ignore those combinations. So on page 34, there is a matrix table which shows you every combination of those 4 phrases, and it crosses out the ones that yield the results of 3 or 4 consecutive bass drum strokes. So our first 6 combinations are things like right, left, kick, kick, right, kick, kick, left, taking the first phrase and combining it with the second phrase. So we will focus on that combination. It's a nice simple one. It's the first one on the list. Right, left, kick, kick, phrase number 1. Right, kick, kick, left, phrase number 2. Again, treat it as an entity in its own right. Become comfortable with it mechanically, first of all. So let's orchestrate it first of all by taking it around the drums. I'm going to alternate the phrase every drum. So phrase 1, phrase 2, phrase 3, phrase 4, and then the same again, back up the drums. As before, we can try it with our hands spread on 2 different drums. And we can move that around the whole kit. You can take that as fast as you like, depending on what sounds good to your ears. Remember, faster is not always better. It's how you use it. It is nice to have a bit of speed, absolutely, but you've got to use it in a way that makes sense. So, thinking in that way, let's try and incorporate this into our groove again. For now, I'm going to take up beats 3 and 4 of the bar, still playing 16th notes. 1 and 2 and da da boom boom bap boom boom bap. Taking what I just did at the end there, again, we can turn it into a linear groove. Think about the accents. That right hand, for example, can come down to the snare drum for the downbeat. That time, I stayed in the hi-hat and snare drum position. The left hand turns into an accent. This gives you a bit of displacement on that downbeat. So let's explore turning that into 30-second notes as we did with the first phrase. Again, we want an accent on beat 4 of the bar, that standard downbeat position. Because we are now playing 8 16th notes, when we compress that into 30-second notes, that's going to be 4 16th notes. So this phrase is coming in on beat 3 of the bar, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. But that 3E-ander, I'm playing twice per count. Again, prompt on the screen because it can get a little tricky visualizing this. Start nice and slowly. Coming in with an accent on beat 4 again, resuming the hi-hat on the and of 4. Once you get rolling with it, you can have a bit of fun with it. Again, I'm just experimenting, seeing where I can fit it in inside that beat. These are ideas. The idea of this book is to present you with a method to work on linear drumming and then give you a lot of vocabulary, a lot of ideas to play with, and make them your own. So that is just taking the first 2 phrases from the chapter and combining them together. Subsequent pages in the chapter present combination studies, both as 16th notes and 32nd notes. Now, that sounds redundant because you can, of course, play 16th notes as 32nd notes. You just change the metronome position. But combination study number 4, specifically on page 37, is a nice one because it combines 16th notes and 32nd notes. So, for example, bar number 8. You get this really nice rhythm that combines 16th notes and 32nd notes. Again, only using phrases from this chapter, but you can hear straight away you get this really interesting kind of fill, rhythm, stop-start, dual tempo rhythm sort of thing, right? And that can be a lot of fun to play around with and sounds really cool as well. So I'm going to leave this chapter there. A lot of the concepts from the first chapter still apply. So in the case of 2 bass drum strokes, if you play a right hand followed by 2 bass drums, you're going to come back in with the left hand. If you play a left hand followed by 2 bass drums, you're going to come back in with the right hand. So it's the exact reverse of the first chapter. Now, I know this kind of sounds a little bit labored maybe, but when you start to improvise with this, when you start to combine these phrases together, you don't want to be thinking about the sticking. You want those hands to just do it naturally. And if you have practiced the sticking correctly as per the book's concept, that is going to happen, and you are going to find your right hand is always going to be on the beat when you come out of these fills. You're going to be able to combine these together without having to think about it because of the sticking. They flow naturally into each other. So I hope you've enjoyed that. I hope there's been something of interest there for you. Linear Freedom is out now. It's available through my website on screen. It's available worldwide, and it's also available as a digital version, as a PDF. So if you want one of those without having to worry about shipping and physical copies, get in touch and I can send you one of those. And let me know how you get on with it. I'd love your feedback. I'd love to know if some of you are finding this interesting. And next time, chapter 3, which I falsely said was triplets, chapter 3 is combining the material from the first 2 chapters. So we look at combinations with single and consecutive kick drum strokes in them, and they sound really nice. So I hope to see you next time, and thanks for watching.